What's up, everybody? Today we're going to be ranking arena tour comedians. So we're going to start off today with Dave Chappelle. A lot of you guys commented about how I didn't have any black comedians, so we're going to fix that right off rip here with Dave Chappelle. Dave Chappelle has one of the greatest comedy specials of all time. It might be the tightest hour of stand-up ever recorded. It's probably between that and Skanks for the Memories by Dave Attell. It's just a coincidence that their names sound so similar, but I think Dave Chappelle is going to go into the GOAT tier for me because even though nowadays he's kind of done the George Carlin blueprint of doing more almost like social commentary than like stand-up, and he probably talks about trans people just a little bit too much, I'd still say that Dave Chappelle is, one of the greatest we have today and, super, super funny. And when I go see him live, I still really appreciate his stand-up. So I'm going to keep him in the GOAT tier. Next comedian is not black, but he just pretends to be black. It's Andrew Schulz. And I think Schulz gets a lot of hate on the internet, and, some of it's for good reason. I think a lot of the podcast overexposure culture can really make people hate comedians. When it comes to just stand-up, though, he's very successful, and there's a reason why. He was one of the original people when it came to, doing really short clips on stand-up. I'm not sitting here glazing the guy, but he was one of the first people to really, really make that blueprint work for him. That being said, though, I wouldn't say he's as good as some of the other New York City stand-up comedians, but he really does have my respect. I think Schulz gets a lot of hate, and I've enjoyed him when I've seen him, but I'm going to put him in the all right category. I don't think he's, as bad as some people say. Some people are like, oh, Schulz was never funny. I'm like, nah, man. You should go back and watch some of his old clips where he's doing spots at the Cellar, spots at New York Comedy Club. Like, a lot of those tapes are really funny. The tape of him doing crowd work when the lady had a stroke or a seizure during a show is phenomenal. I was a little on the fence on whether he should be in pretty damn good or all right, but I would say he's a very strong all right. And with a little bit more time, he could probably end up in the pretty damn good category. Moving on, the next comedian also talks like a black guy, pretends to be black, is Matt Rife. And Matt Rife is a comedian that is very successful with his crowd work, and he's one of the highest grossing comedians today, for good reason. The dude is, very easy on the eyes, and he sells a lot of tickets to women. Of course, I get it. He's got a little edge to him. That being said, I saw him live, and he was funny, but I wouldn't rank him above a lot of comedians. I'd say he deserves to be in the all right category. Once again, I think his setup punchline joke material, like his written jokes, are actually good too, but I just wouldn't rank him like above some of the people that you're going to see a little later on in the pretty damn good category. He has my respect. He's successful for a reason. He knows how to market and how to build a brand, and he's done a great job of that. So no disrespect at all. I just don't think he's as funny as some of the other people you're going to see me rank up here later. So let's move on. The next comedian we have is Eddie Murphy, and Eddie Murphy is, going into the GOAT category, even though he doesn't do stand-up anymore, and we'll probably never see him do stand-up again. I think the closest we got to that was when he did the SNL anniversary, and he hadn't been there in a while. I don't think that Eddie's going to ever do stand-up again, but for what he did in the 80s, selling out, Madison Square Garden when he was just like 26 or 27 years old, being as comedically talented as he was so young. He can do impressions, he can write sketches, he can do stand-up at a high level. Eddie Murphy deserves to be in the GOAT tier, in my opinion, and I think that a lot of Delirious and a lot of Raw is very funny, so I'm going to keep him in the GOAT tier just for the sake of the list. Next comedian we have is Joe Rogan. Some of these are a repeat because some of the arena tour comedians I ended up ranking in my last video. Joe doesn't really make me laugh. I think he's actually made me laugh a couple times on his podcast more than his stand-up. My ranking for him from the last one has not changed. I still put him in not for me. He knows the format of stand-up comedy, but it just doesn't work for me, and that's not to disrespect him. I think he gets a little too much hate sometimes. Some of these comedians, because of how much exposure they have and how many eyes they have on them, get a lot of hate. I wouldn't say that Joe is the worst comedian ever. Some people would. I don't think he is. Next comedian we have is Jerry Seinfeld. Now, Seinfeld for me is really, really just a master of comedy writing. Some people are going to say that he's not that good, that he's overrated, that he wouldn't have a career without Larry David. But to me, I would say when it comes to comedy writing, the dude, when it comes to callbacks, using the funniest words in the setup of a joke, the angles, everything, just kind of his natural inquisition he has when making observations. I would say he is one of the pioneers of observational comedy. He wasn't the first one to do it, obviously, but he's one of the greatest to to do it, I think. And even though he's very clean, and some people even call him corny because of how clean he is, like I think Anthony Jeselnik said he's like aggressively corny, I still think that Jerry Seinfeld has an edge to him that's very unique. I saw him recently and he was incredibly edgy, more so than I would ever expect from someone who's known to be as wholesome as this guy. Wholesome as a comedian. Obviously, the guy was in his 30s dating a 17-year-old. That's not wholesome, but you get the idea. The point is, as a comedian, Jerry's funny. He shouldn't have banged that 17-year-old, but that's besides the point. We're just talking about comedy today. That's why I have him in the GOAT tier. Some of you are going to disagree with that, but that's okay. This is my list. Moving on, we have Andrew Dice Clay. I saw Andrew Dice Clay a few years ago, and it was, I'm not even shitting you, it was one of the worst shows I've ever been to. I thought that I would enjoy it and that he would kind of remind me of like some of the older tapes of his I watched where he did really well. He just, in my opinion, hasn't really aged well with the times and how comedy has evolved. I put him in Will Not Watch. After I saw him live, I will never ever go live and see Andrew Dice Clay again. That being said, though, the dude is successful for a reason. He still sells out comedy clubs. He could probably sell out theaters. He's one of those guys who I have respect for. It's just not for me. Some people would be like, how do you put him below Joe Rogan? I don't really know what to tell you. Andrew Dice Clay for me after that one live show, I was just kind of really disappointed and it left a bad taste in my mouth, but that's why I put him in Will Not Watch, so hopefully you guys understand where I'm coming from with that one. Next comedian we have is Shane Gillis, another repeat from the last tier list. For me, Shane Gillis is very, very funny. I think he's probably one of the better comedians working today, probably top 5 working today, and some people would say he's on track to be the greatest of all time. I would agree with that. I would say if he kept doing what he was doing, if he kept working hard and all that, I really think he does have the potential to be in the GOAT conversation. His sketch comedy is great. His stand-up specials are great. He's funny on podcasts. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. This guy's funny. If you're gonna go on his clips from SNL and be like, this guy's not even funny, I don't know what to tell you. And I think some people have like a stigma towards him, especially like the progressive people who wanted his career to be over when he got fired. And he proved that he doesn't need to go on the Daily Wire or talk about cancel culture and comedy and all this shit to be funny and make a comeback. I mean, the dude ended up hosting SNL twice after the fact, and he did a good job. Like I said, he's gonna probably end up here as long as he keeps working hard and doing the right things. The next comedian we have is Gabriel Iglesias. Gabriel Iglesias is a unique comedian. You could watch him with your entire family. You could watch him with children. You could watch him with old people. Does he make me laugh as hard as Dave Chappelle or even Shane? No, but I do have a massive respect for Gabriel Iglesias. I mean, the dude sells out arenas for good reason. He's like one of the most marketable comedians there is. I'd put him in pretty damn good in terms of just sheer funniness. The dude talks about what George Carlin would call the little world, like, family, friends, experiences, everyday occurrences, observations, all that good stuff, and he's really good at it. And there's a reason why he's been doing arenas and theaters for so damn long. He even comes back to clubs every now and then. Maybe to me, he's not as funny as a guy like Louis C.K., but he makes the walls shake, he makes his audience laugh, and he proves that he's undeniably funny, and he deserves all the success he's seeing. In my opinion, I wouldn't put him in the next threshold, but some people might disagree with me and put him up here. That's fine. The list is subjective. All in all, the last time I saw him live, he was great. So all the respect in the world to Gabriel Iglesias. He deserves to be in pretty damn good in my eyes. The next comedian we have is Jim Gaffigan. To me, Jim Gaffigan gets the same exact treatment as Gabriel Iglesias. Super funny, super clean. I like that he doesn't have to rely on expletives or, anything filthy to be funny. In fact, he can milk a premise really well without being, dirty. And I think that's a good skill to have. I'm not saying that all comedy has to be clean, but when people are clean and they're really witty and they're unique with their style, it really, really catches my eye. And I think Jim Gaffigan's one of the best at that. He can really wring the towel of a bit and just get all the funniness and every last drop of it out. The observations he makes, the misdirection's great. As I said previously, similar to Fluffy, he just doesn't make me laugh as much as some of the other guys. So I put him in the pretty damn good territory, right behind Fluffy. I do think he's one of the better comedians working today, and that's why I think he deserves to be in the pretty damn good territory. So next comedian we have is Daniel Tosh. Daniel Tosh is interesting because a lot of comedians partake in kind of this overexposure that takes place with podcasts and all the other stuff. But Daniel Tosh, for a while, didn't do any press, didn't do any podcasts, didn't do any late night shows. He might release another stand-up special, but after People Pleaser, he didn't really want any more exposure. He kind of just wanted privacy and to do his own thing. He got married and had, a few few kids, and he's one of the funniest stand-up comics I've ever seen live. I saw him within the last few years, and he started the Tosh show, which I don't even really watch that much, but I imagine it's fine, and it doesn't get in the way of how he does his stand-up, because Tosh, to me, is in my top 10 of all time. He goes in the GOAT tier, if you ask me. I really love Daniel Tosh. I would say Daniel Tosh is, just naturally so funny, very dark, but he does it in a way that's not, predictable or telegraphed. He's genuinely one of the most clever writers I've ever heard do stand-up, like one of the most clever comedians, and his show Tosh.0 was great too, and that's why I put him up here in GOAT tier. Next comedian we have is Chris Rock, and I know I'm going to get some flack for this, but I want to start off by saying I really respect Chris Rock. I've seen him live with friends, and he's really funny. I think he's a great comedian. He deserves all the success he has. I really think he's one of the hardest working guys. He's from New York City. New York City comedians are a different breed. They truly are. I've said that before, and I'll say it again. If you're from New York City and you're doing stand-up in that scene and you survive, there's just no way you're not going to come out funnier and more polished from it. That being said, though, Chris Rock, compared to everyone else on the list, I would put him in pretty damn good. Some people are going to say that he deserves to be up here in the GOAT tier. So he makes me laugh similar to like Shane or Fluffy or Jim Gaffigan, but I would just say these guys to me make me laugh harder. But that being said, Chris is one of the best comedians working today. He's a great comedy writer, great misdirection, talks about race in a really unique way. The special Bring the Pain and Bigger and Blacker are two of the best comedy specials of all time. A lot of people put him in their top 10 of all time, but to me, I don't think he's in my top 10. But like I said, I really respect Chris. I love him, and to me, his brother Tony is actually funnier than him. That being said, it doesn't matter. Chris Rock's in pretty damn good. Moving on, we have Trevor Noah. This is going to surprise you guys. Trevor Noah is very successful. I think he's top 10 grossing comedians for the year of 2024. And, he was on The Daily Show and all that, but I don't like his stand-up. I don't find him funny. It's not for me. I didn't like kind of the smug sense of humor he had when he was on The Daily Show. Jon Stewart's somebody I really love and respect, but I don't think Trevor Noah is a good replacement. Trevor Noah for me is will not watch. You'll never catch me going to see him live. You'll never catch me being like, oh, you got to check out this Trevor Noah clip. I don't have any disrespect towards him. I just didn't really appreciate his style of comedy, and he's successful for a reason. Don't just listen to my opinion and think that he's a bad comic. He's not. Obviously, objectively, he makes his audience laugh. You don't get picked to do The Daily Show if you don't resonate with a lot of people. I don't really care for Trevor Noah, but I do respect how successful he is, and obviously he's doing something right if he's one of the highest grossing comedians of all time. So what do I know? This is just my opinion about his stand-up in general. So next comedian is Tom Segura. Even though he gets hate for some of the ways that he's carried himself online over the past few years, it's not really comedy that I enjoy anymore. In fact, I look back on some of the older stuff and I realize I was at a different point in my life. I don't like some of the things he says on the pod, obviously, him and Bert with Two Bears, One Cave. And I think a good chunk of the hate that they receive, there's a good reason for it. I'm going to put him next to Joe Rogan. That being said, though, I understand why he's successful. He's got kind of a dark sense of humor. He actually reminded me for a while of Louis. And even though I don't really find his comedy funny anymore, he is somebody I will find myself watching from time to time. Like if somebody sends me a clip, they're like, dude, look at this funny Tom Segura stand-up bit. I'll watch it and probably really enjoy it. But, this is just my opinion. I don't hate the guy. I think he gets too much hate, but similar to Joe and similar to Schulz and some of the podcast guys, I think that a lot of it just has to do with how exposed they are to their audiences constantly. Like if Tom wasn't doing new podcasts all the time, he wouldn't have went on the rant about poor people and kind of lost the plot to a lot of his older fan base. So, and maybe if he didn't expose himself so much, I would put him higher on the list. But don't listen to me. I'm just a fucking YouTuber talking shit. But like this is why I put Tom in not for me. So I respect the guy, just not for me. Moving on, we have Adam Sandler. Now, Adam Sandler is a comedian that I don't think his main thing is stand-up. Like I think his musical comedy is some of the best, and I think he was great on SNL. But his stand-up by itself, I would put in the all right category. I would put it at like the top of the all right category. He's put out a lot of great movies. He's done some great sketch comedy. If I saw Sandler was coming to my local area, I would definitely go see him. And, obviously he put on guys like Norm Macdonald and Chris Rock and David Spade, Chris Farley, and all these guys. He put on a lot of his friends, and I have a lot of respect for that attitude towards comedy and working is, helping your friends eat and get to a better place in their career. So I really respect Adam. Adam seems like a great dude. Similar to Theo, I would just say that his stand-up by itself, it never really stood out to me. But even if I don't think someone is GOAT tier, or I think they will not watch, if they're successful, you should always research why they're successful, what it was that got them to the point where they're at now. So that's why I put Sandler in all right. But like I said, I have no disrespect towards the man. I love Sandler, and I can't wait to see Happy Gilmore too. Moving on, we have Bert Kreischer. Now, Bert Kreischer gets a lot of hate. That being said, Bert is very successful. He just put out a new special. I haven't watched it yet. I probably won't watch it. His stand-up is a little repetitive for me. He does the machine story a lot, and I don't think that telling the same story all the time is really my idea of stand-up. I'd like to see some new developed material, but he appeals to a lot of people who like to drink, who like to party, who like to be a bit of a frat boy, live that lifestyle even as they age. Similar to the other Rogan Sphere comics, I think he just overexposes himself, and I think that's where some of the hate comes from. As I mentioned previously, he comes off as a bit of a narcissist because of how much he talks about himself. I think deep down he's a good dude, and I stand by that. You know, it's just not for me. His stand-up's not really for me. He's successful for a reason. He should be studied. You should understand what it was that makes people want to go watch a guy like Bert, even though we, as you know, people online might not find him funny or find ourselves ever watching him live. He's obviously very charismatic. I think he has a good stage presence, but I just wish he spent a little bit more time honing his written material. That's why I put Bert in not for me. Moving on, we have Kevin Hart. I think Kevin Hart gets some hate from people. They think like, oh, the tiny black guy thing just doesn't work for me, or, you know, Kevin Hart is a Hollywood plant, or all this bullshit. You know, Katt Williams went on that rant about him. I think Kevin is a good comic. Like, there's tapes of him from, you know, New York City when he was younger, just crushing at like Caroline's or, you know, some of these other rooms. And I would say that Kevin Hart's a great comedian. He's not really super funny to me. Like, there's bits of his I'll watch and I'll laugh my ass off at, but, you know, if I went and saw him live, I'd probably leave like a little disappointed. And that's not his fault. It's just his stand-up style and comedy isn't really for me. Like, his animated, goofy style of humor is not really for me. So I would put him like right behind Adam Sandler, maybe even above Adam Sandler in the all right category. I think he's great. You know, he's great at networking. He's very likable. He's very marketable, and he did everything right. You know, he's a hustler. His comedy, like his stand-up style, just isn't for me. I don't want you guys to think that me saying that someone's stand-up style isn't really for me or makes me laugh doesn't mean I don't respect them as performers. Like, obviously, Kevin is doing one of the best comedy tours in the world right now. The dude sells out fucking stadiums. So that's something to be noted. There's a reason for that. You know, whether you think it's some conspiracy of him wearing a dress or not, doesn't matter. The point is, Kevin did the right things in his career, and he markets himself. He gets deals on Netflix consistently. He gets commercials. There's a reason he's so successful. Maybe he doesn't make me laugh as hard as any of these guys up here, but I can't deny his success, and I can't deny how hard the guy works. So that's why I put him at the top of the all right category. Next, we have Joe Coy. My first real exposure to Joe Coy was the monologue he did for the Golden Globes that was like super last minute. And a lot of people shat on him and said he's not a funny comic. And I will say that I don't think that a lot of that was his fault. Joe Coy did the monologue on like less than 2 weeks notice, where something like that takes like a month or two to prepare for. And he did it in like 10 days notice, maybe even less. I don't know what the exact number was. So I respect the guy as a performer. He's another dude who's very successful commercially. He sells so many tickets, and it actually blows my mind, but I guess he just does really well with like the Latino community. I've watched his stand-up before, and it's not for me, but like I said, I have so much respect for the guy because he really is like a tremendous comic. He's been working forever. Like, I actually have a mutual friend with him, and she's told me how hard the guy works, how much research he does about the cities he's going into before he does all that, and I really have an appreciation for that. So I think he got a tough blow when the Golden Globes thing happened, but I really do respect him, even though I would never catch myself watching him live or watching any of his stand-up sets. The monologue itself for the Golden Globes, his delivery was good. It's just a nightmare environment for a comedian, especially on less than 2 weeks' notice. So that's why I put him there. The next comedian we have is Hannah Gadsby. I know what you guys are thinking. Finally, a comedian that's not a man or woman. But Hannah Gadsby, I've seen her stand-up. I've given it a shot. I won't watch it. It's not funny to me. I don't know what to say. To shit on Chappelle and say you can't make trans jokes is just anti-comedy. Like, you can say they're hacky trans jokes, but be like, you should not talk about trans people. Shut the fuck up. So that made me upset towards her. And then of all the stand-up I've seen of her, I was never really impressed. So it blows my mind when you read the comments section on one of her stand-up clips. People are like, dude, is there a laugh track in the back? Who the fuck is laughing at this? They should be on an FBI watch list. So I don't really appreciate her stand-up. I would put her below Trevor Noah and Andrew Dice Clay, but That being said, she's successful for a reason, whatever that may be. But that's why I put her down here. Next, we have Katt Williams. Now, Katt Williams, I think, is a splendid comedian. He's a master of marketing. Everything he did on Club Shay Shay was on purpose, and I totally understand why he did it, because he ended up on the Joe Rogan Experience. You know, he didn't even have to name the 6 comedians that Joe Rogan's been putting on that were never funny. Even though we can all speculate in our heads who that was, he didn't have to do any of that. The entire rant he went on Club Shay Shay was on purpose so that he could market his upcoming tour and comedy special that came out later on. So I'm going to put Katt Williams also as a comedian in the GOAT tier because his stand-up is also incredibly funny, as well as being a master of marketing. Not a lot of comedians are great at both. You know, a good amount of them are. Some of them don't have to be as good at marketing because of just how good their stand-up is and all that. But Katt Williams is a master of both. He's definitely in GOAT tier for me. It would be super cool to meet Katt Williams one day. I've only seen him live once when he dropped in at the Comedy Store, and The Pimp Chronicles is one of my top 10 specials of all time, so that's why I put him in the GOAT tier. Next, we have Sebastian Maniscalco. This is going to turn into a glazing fest here, but Sebastian Maniscalco to me is GOAT tier. I love Sebastian. I think the dude is top-notch when it comes to physical comedy. You know, he's kind of like an Italian Seinfeld with like his mannerisms, his use of certain words that are funniest to him, and his act-outs are, you know, otherworldly. The dude can take a premise that is written hilariously and easily turn it from an 8 to a 10 with just how good he is with act-outs and how good he is at his physical comedy and his faces that he makes, the multiple voices he does. I think Sebastian is super underrated. And I know it's a weird thing to say someone's underrated when they sell out arenas, but I don't think a lot of people give him the respect he deserves in the comedy conversation, because a lot of the time we talk about, you know, Chappelle, you know, Norm Macdonald, Patrice, but like Sebastian, when it comes to like his physical comedy, is probably one of the best and most well-rounded comedians we have. So that's why I put him in the GOAT tier, even though some of you might disagree with that. That's why I put him up there. Next, we have Bill Burr. Man, I can't give Bill Burr his flowers enough. He's in my top 10 of all time. I love the guy. I think he's great. You know, some people might bitch about him because his wife probably plays a pretty important role in a lot of the decisions he makes creatively now, but he's also to a point where he can make the decisions he wants. He's made enough money. He's made millions and millions of dollars. He slept on a futon until he was in his mid-30s. His story is incredibly inspiring. He felt like, you know, in the beginning, he was just happy to do stand-up, and then eventually he kept doing it. The Philly rant happened, and, you know, people understood that that was a legendary thing for him to do. Even if it didn't immediately help his ticket sales, it really just cemented him a forever spot in the Comedy Hall of Fame. So that's why I have Bill Burr in GOAT tier. I think he's a pretty easy person to put up here. You know, even if you think that his wife runs his life and all this shit, he's still a funny comedian, and some of his old specials like Let It Go and I'm Sorry You Feel That Way, they're just great specials. And even if he put out absolute dog shit in his next special, it doesn't matter. I didn't really like his newest special, but the point is the dude has just done so much in the world of comedy. You can't really deny him as an artist and him as one of the greatest of all time, in my opinion, but that's just how I feel. Moving on, we have Russell Peters. One of my friends is actually opening for Russell Peters right now, and I've met Russell. He's a very nice guy, very sweet, and I think his stand-up is very good. Like, he really hits on the impressions and the racial stereotypes. He does a very good job of that. I just wouldn't rank him higher than any of these people up here. I would say he deserves to be right here with Kevin Hart and Adam Sandler in the all right category. He's one of the most successful comedians for a reason. You know, he's very good at reaching other demographics with his voices, with his, you know, impressions and all this. So that's why I put him over here. I just wouldn't say in terms of writing that I would put him on the similar level to any of these guys, even though he's, you know, very highly respected. You know, he sells a lot of tickets. He's great at marketing. He's been doing comedy forever, so I have a lot of respect for him. I just don't think I'd put him up here. That's why I have Russell Peters in the all right category. All right, we're on to our last two. We have Tony Hinchcliffe. So Tony Hinchcliffe, he runs Kill Tony, one of the biggest comedy, probably the biggest comedy podcast above Joe Rogan's podcast, if we're being honest. Like, this gets so many listeners, so many views on YouTube, so many everything. But Tony Hinchcliffe's comedy itself, I'm going to put in the will not watch. It's not really for me. I would put him towards the top of this category. I think he's, you know, funnier than Trevor Noah and Hannah Gadsby, but I really won't catch myself watching his stand-up. It's just not for me. I think he goes a little too hard on the edgelord stuff. I really enjoyed his roast on the roast of Tom Brady. I thought that was good. But other than that, like, I wouldn't catch myself watching him live. And I think like the stuff he did at the Trump rally was incredibly cringe. He probably would have been it not for me. Even if the set he did ended up being funny, I just think that railed him down here a few notches lower. And, I know people are going to be like, oh, railed. Why? Because Tony's gay. My point is, I put him in the will not watch. He's not somebody I'm going to find myself watching. I don't really watch Kill Tony. I watch clips of it when there's comedians I like. And finally, we have the highest gross comedian of 2024. We have Nate Bargatze. Now, Nate Bargatze, I watched some of his stand-up recently. I've gotten really into him lately, and I think he's very funny. I think he's one of the kings of dry humor. In terms of ranking him, I would say he's at the top of pretty damn good. I would say him and Shane are neck and neck. You could probably even convince me to put Shane above him. But the reason I put Nate Bargatze up here is because, I really love his style of dry comedy, his dry humor. Similar to Fluffy and Jim Gaffigan, I think he's funnier than these two, but he's just very good at being marketable and being naturally funny without being dirty. A lot of people who are naturally funny might slip into profanity or something like that, but Nate can just be funny off the dome, talking about, really clean stuff and really marketable stuff. You could probably take your kids and your wife to see this. You could probably take your grandparents. My grandma can't stand to hear the word fuck, so if I took her to see Nate Bargatze, she would probably really enjoy it. So that's why I put Nate Bargatze at pretty damn good. What do you guys think about this list? Do you think some of them I crashed out? Do you think some of these people deserve to be higher, deserve to be lower? Let me know what you think. If you guys want to support me, check out the Patreon page down below. Make sure to leave a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video and subscribe if you're new to the channel. That's all I got for you guys today. I love you so much, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.